Let's start off by crediting South Florida. They played with the appropriate level of force and competitiveness.
How do you sign a $50 million deal, one of the biggest in sports history, only to be told you're not good enough for the team? This isn't just a story about a roster spot. It's a story about power, jealousy, and a decision that has insiders claiming the Team USA coach absolutely exploded behind closed doors. The Caitlin Clark saga is far more twisted than anyone realizes, and it all began with a contract that made her richer and more powerful than the very legends who would decide her fate. The ink was barely dry on Caitlin Clark's groundbreaking Gatorade deal when the whisper started. We're not talking about a standard endorsement. We're talking about a reported $50 million empire-building partnership. To put that in perspective, this deal dwarfs the initial contracts of countless male superstars. It was a statement. Gatorade wasn't just signing a basketball player. They were anointing a queen. This single act catapulted Clark from college phenom to a global brand, a force of nature whose gravitational pull extended far beyond the court. She was suddenly in a financial stratosphere that most of her peers, including the veterans on Team USA, could only dream of. This wasn't just about money. It was about influence. It signified a seismic shift in the sports landscape, where a rookie, before playing a dozen professional games, held more commercial power than the entire establishment. This unprecedented success, however, came with a hidden cost. While the world celebrated her triumph, a small, powerful group of gatekeepers watched with narrowed eyes. They saw her meteoric rise not as a victory for the sport, but as a disruption to their carefully constructed world. The $50 million deal wasn't just a headline. It was a spark that would ignite a firestorm. As the smoke began to clear, it became obvious that the celebration was about to be cut short by a brutal act of defiance from the very people who should have been welcoming her. While the world saw a new icon being crowned, the inner sanctum of Team USA basketball saw something else entirely, a threat. For decades, the women's Olympic team has been a dynasty built on hierarchy and dues paying. It's a club where legends are forged over years of international competition, not through Nike and Gatorade commercials. The locker room is ruled by an old guard, veterans who have bled for their medals and expect a certain level of deference. They built the house, and they make the rules. Suddenly, Caitlin Clark, a rookie, was not just knocking on the door. She was threatening to become the face of the entire franchise without ever wearing the senior jersey. Whispers from team insiders suggested the mood was tense. The constant media coverage, the record-breaking jersey sales, the $50 million deal, it was all Clark all the time. For players who had dedicated their lives to winning gold medals in relative obscurity, this new reality was a bitter pill to swallow. It felt as if their lifetime achievements were being overshadowed by a player who hadn't earned her stripes in their world. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about a culture clash. The old guard valued grit, seniority, and a quiet, team-first mentality. Clark represented the new age of athlete as brand, an individual whose star power could eclipse the team itself. The resentment wasn't always spoken aloud, but it was palpable, and the simmering fury was about to boil over into a public execution, a message sent to Clark and the world that no amount of money could buy you a seat at their table. What happened next wasn't just a roster decision. It was a coup. Then the bomb dropped. The official 12-player roster for the Paris Olympics was announced, and Caitlin Clark's name was nowhere on it. The reaction was not just disappointment. It was a collective shockwave of disbelief and outrage that reverberated through the entire sports world. It instantly became the biggest story, eclipsing the players who actually made the team. Fans were furious. Pundits were dumbfounded. How could the single most popular and influential player in the sport be left at home? The official explanations from the selection committee felt laughably thin. They cited her lack of experience with the senior national team. They mentioned the need for her to get some rest after a grueling college season. They talked about wanting players who had paid their dues. But to the public, these sounded like flimsy excuses designed to cover up the real reason. It felt personal. It felt punitive. Major media personalities went on air and called it one of the dumbest decisions in sports history. Not from a basketball perspective, but from a marketing and growth perspective. The decision was immediately framed as a massive blunder, an act of self-sabotage by a committee that seemed completely out of touch with the modern sports landscape. The snub wasn't just a footnote. It was a declaration of war. Team USA had willingly chosen to go to Paris without their brightest star, and in doing so, they had invited a level of scrutiny and criticism that would haunt them for months to come. The committee tried to control the narrative, but they had already lost. The world was demanding answers, and the official story just wasn't cutting it. At the center of this firestorm stood one person who had to publicly defend the indefensible, Coach Cheryl Reeve. In press conferences, she was the picture of composure, a stoic leader sticking to the company line. She spoke in carefully chosen words, emphasizing the importance of chemistry and the value of having veterans who understood the international game. She praised Clark's talent, but repeatedly fell back on the idea that this specific roster was the right mix to win gold. On the surface, it was a professional, albeit unconvincing, explanation. But behind the scenes, a completely different story was emerging. Insiders painted a picture of a coach under immense pressure. The explosion wasn't a public shouting match. It was the internal combustion of a coach caught between a rock and a hard place. On one side, she had the undeniable game-changing talent and marketing machine of Clark. On the other, she had a locker room of powerful, influential veterans who reportedly were not ready to welcome Clark into their fold. The decision was allegedly less about a strategic basketball choice and more about appeasing established stars to maintain locker room harmony. Her public defense was seen by many as a performance, a facade to protect the players who had reportedly pushed for Clark's exclusion. She was forced to champion a decision that many believed was a mistake for the growth of the sport. Her calm demeanor masked the turmoil beneath the surface. As the official excuses crumbled, a darker, more human motive began to surface: jealousy. The conversation quickly turned to veteran leaders, long considered the gatekeepers of the league. For years, they had been known for their fierce competitiveness and unwelcoming stance toward rookies. Comments made before the season even began, warning Clark that reality is coming, suddenly took on a different tone. Multiple reports suggested that some veterans were not thrilled with the idea of the Olympic experience becoming the Caitlin Clark show. They had worked their entire careers for this moment and didn't want their final shot at gold overshadowed. The $50 million deal became the ultimate symbol of perceived injustice. A rookie earning more from one endorsement than some had made in their careers. In that light, the snub looked less like strategy and more like a final power play, a way to remind the world who was still in charge. But beyond locker room politics, the omission carried massive business consequences. The Caitlin Clark effect is real. Ratings surge, tickets sell out, merchandise explodes. She turned the NCAA Women's Championship into a historic draw and brought record-breaking viewership to the WNBA. The Olympics represent a global stage, and broadcasters were reportedly counting on Clark as a central figure in coverage. Her presence would have guaranteed millions of casual viewers. By leaving her off the roster, Team USA didn't just bench a player. They sidelined a marketing phenomenon. It baffled analysts who saw it as prioritizing fragile egos over unprecedented growth. Amid the controversy, Clark responded with remarkable poise. She didn't lash out. She didn't criticize the committee. When she addressed media, she expressed support for the team and said it gave her motivation to improve. She shifted focus back to playing for Indiana and let her performance speak. Her maturity contrasted sharply with the drama surrounding the decision. She won the court of public opinion without saying much at all. In the end, this wasn't about one roster spot. It was about old guard versus new era, hierarchy versus revolution, tradition versus superstardom. The $50 million deal wasn't the cause. It was the catalyst. On one side stood decorated veterans defending a system of earned hierarchy. On the other stood a transcendent talent whose popularity threatened to rewrite the rules overnight. Coach Reeve was caught in the middle and chose to protect the past. The lingering question isn't whether Team USA can still win gold. The deeper question is what they lost in the process. In trying to protect their internal order, did they alienate a generation of new fans? Did they reveal an institution afraid of the very progress they claimed to champion? They may return home with medals, but they may also discover that the sport has already moved forward, led by the very player they decided wasn't good enough.